Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Outskirts podcast with Tanner and friends. I'm so pleased to share a discussion I had recently with the Thrasher brothers. Rafe and Ryan are twins, and the story that they've shared with us centers around a horrific disease, their struggle to define terms, find healing, and hope for a future. Please enjoy.
All I see is your huge beard, Rafe. It's just ginormous.
Well, here we are.
I was thinking, Tanner, that it's gonna be a challenge for you to know who's talking, but not as long as the video's going. You should be able to tell.
Yeah.
Because we sound exactly alike.
Yeah. I think your audio is a little more crisp than his, I guess. So that'll help the listener for the sake of the ones who aren't watching the video, I guess. But you're Ryan, and you guys are twin brothers,
Yep.
Yeah, identical.
apart from the beard and the bald head.
Yeah.
You're identical.
I should have sent. I meant to today. It slipped my mind several times. I was thinking about it to send you a picture of right after surgery of what my head looked like.
Oh, wow. How? Yeah, I guess before we dive into it, just how old are you guys?
43.
Yeah, okay. And Rafe, you just had a new child last year?
Yeah. 6-month-old, July 19th. His name's Bowden.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
And Ryan, how far out are you from your last surgery?
Oh gosh, it's a little. I think it's a little over 3.5 years. December 2021 is 3 years out from that. Yeah, but they count from your initial diagnosis is how far out they actually say you are. So it's August of 2021 is when I was diagnosed with high grade 4 glioblastoma, which is the most deadly brain cancer there is. It's actually what so Ted Kennedy. You remember Ted Kennedy, is a senator?
Yeah.
One of the Kennedys. He died from it. So did Joe Biden's son, Bo, died from it. So.
Really? Wow.
Mhm.
And more
Okay.
people around here are we're hearing more and more people are in amongst our social circle that are getting it, right, Ryan? Being diagnosed with it.
Yeah, well, I hear about quite a few, but some of that may be that people know that I've had it, so they try to like get people in touch with me for encouragement or for treatment options, like what I did or have done. So,
But we've heard from the nurse women in our family that there are more and more cases.
What
At least that's what they had said.
you guys in the Chicagoland area or
not really.
No, go ahead, Ryan.
2.5 hours west on the Mississippi. The Quad Cities is, where Davenport, Iowa is, by chance.
roughly, yeah.
So right on the border of Iowa and Illinois there. So we're in I'm in Moline. He's close to Moline. So yeah.
So is it densely populated?
Yeah, the whole
Pretty much.
metropolitan area is about 350,000 people. Moline is only about 45,000, I think, these days. So it's kind of it's real spread out, 350,000 around the area. So yeah, John Deere is the principal employer. That and the Army. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering. So there in your friend base there in that metro area, you know other people who've been diagnosed?
yeah, I've known several people now, probably 6 or so in the last couple of years that I've been made aware of that have what I have. When the official stats on it are like 1 in every 100,000 people should have,
One of my coworkers in a team of 6 people was diagnosed with it and had surgery. So
Wow. And it's glioblastoma.
Yeah, glioblastoma.
Glioblastoma.
Mhm.
That's stemming from the glio brain cells, right?
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
primary brain cancer. Primary brain cancers do not metastasize, which is a blessing. But it's hard to treat in the brain. So, but I can get into all that once we really start, like what happened and what I went through. But
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I just wanted to get a feel for how far removed you were from the story you're going to be telling. And yeah, thank you both for giving us your time on the Outskirts podcast. So we have twin brothers Ryan and Rafe Thrasher with us tonight, and they have a story to tell. So I'm gonna let you guys rock, paper, scissors, or do whatever to decide who goes first. Use your twin. You could probably just like look at each other and work something out.
Maybe it boils down to who's going to speak first, but for me, it's gonna, if I tell a story, it's going to be from my perspective, and it's going to be the moment I encountered the news that he had a growth in his brain. But I don't know if that's the appropriate place to start, Ryan.
um, man, I've kind of been thinking about this on where to start because there's approximate starting point, and that's when
Right.
right before I came down and had emergency brain surgery. And maybe I'll kind of start there, and I'll work my way back, kind of, because there's a larger story in my life that I think fits into it. Because I think I'm a strong Christian, and or at least reasonably strong, trying to get stronger and more kingdom minded. And my faith journey is a central part of this story, and I'll kind of talk through that. So, oh gosh. All of us, during COVID, depending on what your employment was, went through a lot of stress because we didn't know if we were going to get mandated to take the vaccine. I was always staunchly against it and saw it as something sinister and didn't trust it for various reasons. And so I was going through a lot of stress at the time of my job back in 2021. Well, actually, even 2020, there was a lot of stress in my job. But I was diagnosed with high grade 4 glioblastoma brain cancer, which is the most deadly brain cancer there is, in August of 2021. The stress I was going through in my job was really hit its apex a few months before that. Remember, I work for the government, and they were getting pretty strict, and we're making it very known that you had to be vaccinated or you're going to lose your job. And my boss was a retired Army colonel, and he would stress that with me. And I was under a lot of stress from a work project at the time, changing a major business process. So I had a lot of stress at that time with everything, and I was trying to work on my own. What am I going to do to support my family? Because I'm not getting this dang vaccine. There's no way. And so that was on my mind all the time, and I was, against my even beliefs and everything, trying to screen your employees, who's been vaccinated, who hasn't. I was pushing back on all that, so I was always in arguments with my boss about it. And in back of my mind, I always knew the whole time, I'm like, I'm going to have to quit. At least I thought that at the time, because I'm not doing it. So then, leading up to shortly before I was diagnosed in July of 2021. I was on a family vacation, Colorado, Denver area, and out there I remember having a slight headache. I thought it was just a sinus headache, and maybe it was at the time. I'm not quite sure the sequence of everything, what occurred, but I remember I've never been one to have an anxiety attack until, brain cancer, but so I remember like driving up to like elevation, like 10,000 feet elevation. And I just had this weird anxiety that I've never had in my life. I didn't even know what to call it because I didn't know what an anxiety attack was. And I didn't have a headache at the time. It was just complete anxiety. It's like, we got to go down. I can't keep on going up, Dana. Dana's my wife. And I have 3 girls, and they were on the car, and we had all that family like noise in the background too, and so it's like I didn't think anything was really up. Like my health was a concern at that time, and that was in July. And I got home, and I don't remember having any kind of symptoms whatsoever after that. It was fine. And then it was probably about a month later on oh gosh, the first time I remember having a headache, I think it was on Tuesday, the Tuesday of the week, which I think was, let's see, August 15th, 16th, August 17th, I want to say. Yeah, the 17th of August of 2021. I remember having a headache working out. I really believe in exercise. I remember being outside exercising at work, and having a really throbbing, intense headache, which wasn't completely foreign to me. I've had headaches similar in my life. But I got through my workout. I kind of didn't know how, but I got through it. I was in a little bit of pain, more than usual.
Wasn't
And
I
I
with
remember, what's,
Sorry. Wasn't I with you?
you might have been. We worked out quite a bit outside the building, but
I think I was
yeah,
anyway. Go ahead.
yeah, it was just a quick 30-minute workout outside. I always loved it because we connect with God through nature out there and get some exercise and get away from the routine and the mundaneness of work and everything. But so I learned afterwards that I had a staff meeting with my boss and the other supervisors there, and they told me after all this happened that, man, we thought something was up with you because you're just the way you were communicating was kind of weird. So that was my last day of work for 6 months. Tuesday, August 17th of 2021. I didn't go back to work for 6 months after that. So after that, I called into work, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, headache wouldn't go away. It's like I kept on laying in bed for days. I did get out of bed. I remember out of desperation, I went to a naturopath to try to see if he could get the headache to go away. And I remember it was just a struggle to get in the car and out of the car. And he was trying to work on my sinuses and everything. Of course, it didn't work. That was on Thursday, August 19th. And I remember going right back to bed, laying in bed, putting an ice pack on my head, doing anything to try to divert the pain that I was feeling. It was just never ceasing, I never had a migraine in my life, so I'm like, okay, maybe it's a migraine, it's just not going away. But nothing I would do or take would take the pain away. And I just kept on laying there, wouldn't drink, didn't eat. And then on Friday night, I remember getting up and going to the bathroom and getting sick. Laying back down. Then Saturday, Dana's like, finally, she's like, she called my mom, who's a retired nurse. And it's like, I don't know what's going on with Ryan. I remember Rafe was, and Dana were kind of thinking I was just being a wuss about it or something. Or I remember you just saying, just drink some oregano tea, it'll go away or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally my stepdad is like, Sharon, you need to go over there because something's just not right. T could feel it. It's like something's not right. So she came over on Saturday and took a look at me and she's like, yeah, we need to go see a doctor. And so they took me to the emergency room, local hospital. And I remember, like, actually, I should say this, like Dana is like, my wife is like, do you want to go to the ER? I'm like, I hadn't really moved, like hardly out of bed for days really, besides going to the chiro on Thursday. And she was like astonished because I like hopped right out of bed. I'm like, yes, let's go. And because I had some hope of like this pain going away, the worst, like 20 on a scale of 10, like headache pain. And so I was walking down the hall and she thankfully had my arm and her arm, walking down our stairs from the second floor of our house. Because if she didn't, I would have fell right straight down the stairs and got hurt pretty good. Because at the time I wasn't aware of it. But my whole left side of my body was like half numb. Like I didn't have really function on my left side of my body. And I would have fallen down the stairs. She caught me. So I was just barely with it. I don't know. I had been really close to death. I remember her telling my mom that, did you see his urine in the toilet? It was like brown. Like I hadn't drank or ate anything. So it was just complete dehydration besides the inflammation in my brain. And so I got to the ER. They did a scan. Well, before they did a scan, they're like testing me like they do with people with cluster migraines with oxygen mask and like pure oxygen, breathing it for a while, like 15, 20 minutes. And so I remember they had me do that, and I took it off, and they asked me, does it feel any better? I said, not at all. It doesn't feel any different whatsoever. And so that's when they did a MRI or a CAT scan. I can't remember which. And I was completely out of it at that point. And I remember at that point too, they put me on IV Dilaudid, which is one of the strongest painkillers. So I was pretty out of it, but I could hear what was going on. I could make it out. I just wasn't really communicating. And I remember the next thing I remember is the nurse telling my wife, "Miss, your husband's got a mass on his brain, and he needs emergency surgery. Do you want to go to Peoria or Iowa City?" And she just screamed like most wives would. So that began my journey through brain cancer. So I was, and it was I need to back up in time too. It's kind of like almost like one of those novels where you're not always going in linear time wise. So before this happened, this is kind of the providential thing and where my faith comes in. So like I said, I was going through so much stress, and I was searching for a way to provide for my family and what I was supposed to do in this life, for my family and for God. And I remember on Sunday, August 15th, 2 days before I had a headache, I remember being on my knees. I go to a Baptist, at the time I went to I still go to a Baptist church, but I went to a different church at the time. And I was on my knees in the front of the church, praying like I normally do, but really searching my soul and submitting myself to God, asking Him for direction and to take full control of my life, fully submitting to Him, not only for how to provide for my family and what to do, where to move if I needed to move, but also for sin in my life that I had been struggling with for quite a while, off and on. I don't necessarily think I want to say exactly what I was going through, but it was a sin that a lot of guys, especially in this day and age, would go through. A typical sin that men have to deal with in this life, especially. So I've been struggling with that, so I had that on my mind as I was praying. But I remember distinctly, and I wrote about this. I've got it in front of me if I want to draw upon some of that. Is I remember distinctly asking God, I'm like, God, if it takes a major illness, strike me with it, because I want to be in your will in this life and doing what you have for me. And see, that was Sunday, August 15th. And then a week later, I had emergency brain surgery in Iowa City, diagnosed with brain cancer. So, I mean, in hindsight, immediately after that, that gave me so much peace, knowing that the storm I was going through in my life wasn't just something random. It wasn't something from the devil. It wasn't just, an unfortunate thing. It was something directly from God to sanctify me. The Bible speaks of silver a lot and gold and how they're purified. Silver tried 7 times in the burning furnace, and burning the dross out of it to purify it. And we, as His children, are similar, right? So I knew what I was going through was a sanctification. I really doubt I would be here right now if I didn't have that peace of knowing that the trial I was going through, that God was testing me directly with it.
And Ryan, do you recall reading the book of Job together not too long before that?
Yeah, it was probably a week or so before that. And yeah, that's crazy. We were through the entire book of Job together in one night and talked about it. Yeah.
In the weeks before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, your mind was already in the right place. You were in a place where you were prepared to deal with suffering and rationalize it and find its use and its good, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not an unfamiliar scenario to me. But this isn't my story, but I want to talk to you about that some more later.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you ever
So
spoke? Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Rafe.
I was just going to ask him a question. Tanner, have you ever spoken about your story on your podcast or not?
I haven't. Yeah, in fact, I'm not sure anyone I've ever spoken to on my podcast other than a couple of family members um are even aware. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to derail this, but I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
Been waiting for the right time, just
Yeah.
not or the right opportunity, but yeah.
Yep.
Back
Yeah.
to you guys.
Yeah. I mean, so, that was like the first surgery. So it didn't end there. God had some more suffering for me in store for me. So,
But
go on.
you went into that first operation with the full knowledge and you had the awareness that you had prayed that was with you. You were
Yes.
you actually, I mean, what a thing to contemplate. You contemplate your own role in the pain.
Yeah.
God gave you a role in the suffering that he allowed to befall you.
I
And
mean,
that,
it was crazy. I mean, to most people, it was crazy. If I had some of my like family members on, like I remember them come over to the house and they couldn't believe how happy and joyous I was through the entire thing after recovering. Like it was still the happiest. I remember telling people like if I had to decide, do I want to live if I do I want to live the rest of my life? Would I be happier doing that, not having gone through and being this close to God in these like weeks after this, or just having my life end right now without having been this close to God? I would choose my life ending because this was the most joyous time of my life looking back on it, because I'm still to this day striving to get back to it. I'm like literally every moment of my day, of my waking moments, I felt God lead me through every single small, minute detail and decision in my life. And living in the present with my family and letting just not having any plans of my own in the day, is just letting the Holy Spirit guide me through every single moment, and feeling that presence was the best time of my entire life. And I'm still striving to get back to that. I know it's possible. It's just in that suffering and how much faith I had and how close I was drawing to God, and how much you need God in those moments, which is almost like a selfish thing to think now, is I'm not in as much need. But I still, we all still should seek to draw close to God through prayer, reading his word, meditating upon it. But in that time, I was so close that the Holy Spirit was really directing my every thought and detail of my life. It was amazing, even looking back on it. Am I scared to die? I'm only scared to die not because of not being uncertain of my future. After the life is over, it's just anyone that's a husband or a father or a mom, a wife. Anybody is going to think about their loved ones and losing them and them having to live a life without you. But I remember going into the first surgery, I remember talking to my wife. I'm like, I just thank God that it's me and it's not you and one of our kids, because I know where I'm going if I die on the operating table.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That it just resonates so strongly with me. I used to call it a communion of suffering, where it's the closest I've ever felt to Christ, where you depended on him just, for your next breath, basically. And
yeah,
yeah, people talk about being removed from trauma. I was trying to think of what to compare it to. And there've been different stories I've heard where I kind of related, but it wasn't in the spiritual context. But it's like it sounds strange to others because you have this relationship to suffering, right? And it's almost like you miss it. But it's not the pain. It's just the closeness and the dependence
yes.
and his nearness. Um, it's a strange and wonderful thing.
I still have those moments, but it's on walks, maybe listen to some gospel music and just contemplating how blessed I am, and looking up at the sky and just thanking God. But in those weeks after the surgery, it was every single moment. Yeah, it was to feel the presence of God every single second of the day. Yeah.
And
And I know
and
I know it's possible because I've read and heard about other people that's their walk, their daily walk. So
yeah, yeah, I've read and heard of them too. Yeah, and I lived it for a little bit, like you did. And the fearlessness you had going into surgery, um, supernatural, not normal. Do you remember how the medical staff and did they take note of your demeanor and your your calmness, your confidence, or I
I
imagine they
think
did.
I imagine they did. I don't know. I was a little too out of it on the IV Dilaudid going in, but afterwards I know they did because I was just so thankful and I was just filled with the Holy Spirit. It was just overflowing out of me. And so, I was, yeah, just looking back on it, it was everybody I came into contact with. I just was so, God's love was just flowing out to them. So, yeah.
What was your experience of that, Rafe?
Well, I remember the first time seeing him after that at his home, and he had a big smile on his face and wanted to hug everyone. And part of my recollection, Ryan, was I'm not attributing like your experience to this, but the steroids that they had you on played a part in. I don't know if that was like just right near your surgery, right after you came out, or not, but at least that's what Mom had said.
Yeah. And that could be, but it lasted for quite a while after the steroids. So
And yeah, didn't you come down after that? There was I know that there was, a, I don't know for how long, but you had depression.
oh yeah, I wanted to get into that. I don't know how much time we have, but so like with anything, anybody that's going through suffering has probably faced similar like ebbs and flows. Um, I guess since you led into it, I'll go there. So that my surgery is on August 22nd, 2021. Now August 30th, so a little over a week later, I just had this, and I actually wrote this like the night of August 30th, but it is pretty. It cuts to, I think, anyone's soul to like if I were to read this, I can recollect it, but I won't do it justice because I captured exactly what was on my mind after God woke me up from a dream. that night because I've never been one to get depressed. Like, I think of depression as not just, oh, I'm feeling kind of down today. Like, I mean, like absolute darkness, like sinking feeling, like nothing's going to pull me out of this. I feel like I'm just sinking in the deepest part of the ocean, and no one is there to get me. Like, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, Tanner, but I had that feeling on August 30th. So 8 days after my first brain surgery, I was in complete and utter despair. And I wrote what God brought to my mind in a dream completely down.
Do you have it there?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. I've given this testimony at a couple of churches. And I labeled the scripture this centers around is Mark 4, 36 through 40. It's when Jesus is on the shipping vessel. It's after the miracle of the loaves of bread and the fishes. And he's exhausted, so he's asleep in the bottom of that fishing vessel while there's a huge raging storm, and the apostles are, on the deck of the vessel and panicking, right? So,
Yeah.
So I labeled this my helpmeet, which is my wife, Dana. So what a journey through the night. Dana tried her best to the point of her own physical exhaustion to lead me to the peace and tranquility of God. She couldn't do it. I couldn't. My faith was shaken to its core. Every moment was pure and sudden dread, each moment worse than the last. The moments with the kids were pure agony, and I felt such guilt. I felt like a failure of a man. I was a pussy. I was utterly lost at sea, sunk down under the biggest waves, tidal waves of my life, unable to summon any courage to face one singular moment. My wonderfully, lovingly prepared supper by my amazing wife appeared and tasted wonderful, but it carried the satisfaction of sawdust to my soul. And I felt extremely guilty that I felt that way after watching her slave away in the kitchen for hours in a composed, beautiful, manic state with chaos around and inside of her. I felt extreme guilt for pushing her to that state out of my own weakness. She kept trying to fix my mood. She insisted sitting outside with the girls on the front, insisting that I sit outside with the girls on my front porch. I gave in, and it was horrible. I was a prisoner in my self-made prison. I'm reading my scribbles. The life bustling around me didn't exist, and my kids were just burdens. Heather Taj's gift was a beautiful, thoughtful, secular trinket that only served to further isolate this journey to my personal challenge of moving that mountain for others to see. That thought put up higher prison walls for me. While my wife, my helpmeet, couldn't see that and insisted on placing that trinket in front of me wherever I went. Sitting on the front deck with the kids, on the railing in front of me was that trinket. Move this mountain. You can move this. Have the faith to move the mountain. I was just thinking the whole time, I can't do anything on my own. It's God. On the deck in front of me was the chaos of Mavis. At the time, she would have been 2 years old. Swimming in rain boots, she was pretending on a disgustingly dirty deck. I could only think of splinters and sickness rather than perceive the pure inner joy she was experiencing, even with a skull-covered body. She's had eczema, like some bad eczema since she was young. Dana knew I was getting worse, so she tried even harder in a manic state to fix it. It resulted in me ruining the surprise car park outing they had planned for me at 6:45 to lift my spirits. Dana said it was a surprise, and I told her I couldn't take a surprise. she relented and told me we were going to Connie and Steve so the girls could play in the playhouse and we could pray with them. At that point, I panicked and said there was no way I could bear being around them or anyone else. I said I needed her and only her and needed to lay down, even with the utter dread of night approaching, which the locusts kept amplifying all around me. This is like peak locust season, like mind-numbingly, like transporting me into my own isolated prison. It's the sound of these locusts. To this day, like whenever I hear them at that time of year around here, it just transports me to that. Dana saw my desperation when I pleaded to have my mom come get the girls while she held me. Dana knew better than I and had my mom come get the girls. My beautiful stepdad came with my mom for the second time that day and took them to the fire truck park. Meanwhile, I wallowed in self-pity, crashed in my self-created sea prison, thankfully with Dana, my wife, my helpmeet, laying by my side, holding me. Earlier that day, around 2:30, when feeling that same way, I laid down in bed all alone to get some rest, and Dana played Alan Jackson's gospel hymns that once served to lift me up, now only dragging me down to deep despair and a myopic focus on past regrets and why it took this for me to live in the moment and enjoy all my many blessings. I got through that manic depression by endeavoring to equate my current state to the old African proverb of strong seas make strong captains. I then thought of David and Goliath and David's faith in God. I felt God was putting me through rough seas to quicken my healing, to fight a holy war against the devil. I mean, to put that into a little bit of context, you know, I was made aware of the evil of this world, really after like the great financial crisis, 2008, 2009. That got me to question everything. I supported Ron Paul. I started to see light, the light on the darkness got me to see how the world really operated. So I was like, I think I'm going to get to this here, but I was already on a journey about the truth of this world and the evil in it.
We both were on this journey
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go back to this. I cried out in strong voice, yelling at the devil that God's army would prevail with full confidence of me being under God's wings. In hindsight, I feel this was the devil tempting me to recruit troops to the penultimate good-evil battle well before God's plan. He pulled at my secular belief in what strong men would do in my situation. I've never felt truly strong. I've always had a strong desire to be strong, a man's man, but I always ultimately failed to create that secular construct for myself. Along my worldly journey to be a strong man, I held an intense self-destructive, righteous hatred toward worldly evil, all forms of centralization. That hatred usually manifested itself in me texting others information that I had found that exposed that evil. I was in a decade-long quest to wake up my friends and family. All I accomplished was a Don Quixote-esque, imaginative whirlwind of swings and misses at the devil's worldly boogeymen. I further divided the world just as the devil intended. Now, I'm not saying now, like in hindsight, like looking back, like there is definitely good, and God would encourage us to point out the evil in the world. But this is my state of mind waking up.
I think you're describing it perfectly, and there's validity in what you're saying. It's perfect. The Don Quixote picture there. Yeah. Yeah, you're alienating yourself.
Yes.
There's a way that you share truth in such a way. I mean, it's all about timing and heart and
Because some people just aren't ready.
they're not going to
even
see.
close.
Yeah, it's up to him to remove the scales. You just be there at the right time, right? But
Yep.
very relatable.
Okay.
Keep going.
Yeah, I'm getting close to the end here. Yeah. Okay. The sleep, I put that in quotes because it was probably 45 minutes, as I recall, I received in the arms of my helpmeet, my beautiful wife, rejuvenated me to the point of feeling like a non-prisoner. but I was still exhausted. I woke up at 9:30 to go to the bathroom. What I learned was absolutely invaluable, and it came to me through that short healing rest. I tried to be the captain of my own ship and summon my own strength. Through the peace of sleep, God brought to the forefront of my mind the story of Jesus and the apostles in a fishing vessel being rocked by the wild sea. While the apostles panicked, Jesus slumbered. He had complete faith in his Father. Trying to read my writing here. So the lesson that God taught me was never have faith in yourself. So that whole time, I had never turned to God through all of that. I was just stuck in this prison of despair. I'm pretty sure in my wife's arms, as I was crying myself to sleep, I was turning to God, and shortly before that. But during the peak of this, before that happened, I was not crying out to God for help. It was kind of similar to I was trying to make my way out of what I was going to do to provide for my family back in July, like leading up to the brain cancer. And that whole time, up until like up on my knees, like a week before my brain surgery, I wasn't relying on God. It's actually God commands us not to worry.
Yeah.
Do not worry. Put your faith in God. He'll provide. And I wasn't doing a good enough job. So that was a lesson. So never have faith in yourself. Only have faith in God. To him all glory. You are not the captain. God is. And Jesus said, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And so it's that scripture in Mark 4:36-40 that immediately, right when I woke up, gave me complete, transformative peace. It was like instantaneous. Like I remember waking up and I wrote, I'm like, God's telling me you have to write this down so you can share it with other people.
And it went to work for you. It went to work for you.
Yep.
Right away. And tell me again, where in time are we removed from that surgery?
8 days.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, unless you have questions, like getting back to kind of what happened after that, because it did come back. After that, I said, I'm not doing chemo and radiation. I'm just going to do some alternative treatments that I had read about. I was afraid at the time. I was afraid of chemo and radiation.
Yeah.
And I think I let my fear get the better of me on that.
What did they say about the surgery? Post-surgery, post-op, they said, this is what we expect, this is what we accomplished, and this is what we expect.
Yeah, so the whole time I was kind of in denial. I'm like, I didn't want to believe it was cancer, probably similar to most people. I remember the surgeon afterwards, like, yeah, it was a good surgery, but there was still some left. It was just this small spot, like 10% of it left. So I didn't feel comfortable going deeper in my brain. It's the right, it was right temporal. Really lucky too, because it was in the outskirts of my brain, so it wasn't deep in, and it was really just part of my brain. It doesn't have to do with memory. It's really just control of the left side of your body. So I had like temporary numbness on my left side where I remember like trying to hold a drink and I wouldn't notice, it'd just fall off into my lap. But they're like, no, they were happy with the surgery, but they had left some behind. But they were like, you need to immediately go through chemo and radiation because they're like, this is a very aggressive cancer. They see enough of these cancers when they resect them to know what they're looking at. But I was like, no, I'm going to wait until I get the actual lab results back to really, they weren't saying that the lab results typically come back within like a couple of weeks. They screwed mine up. The sample went bad. It took over a month. At that point, I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing the chemo and radiation. And I went, but 3 months later, it came back. And I had to have another emergency brain surgery. in that time, oh my goodness, my wife, I'm not gonna. The story leading up to it is not as important. It's more important, I guess, what happened after. It was a big test of my faith, though, the second time, because having been told, and actually the first time, I'm like, I don't even want to hear your prognosis, like how much time I have to live, this and that, because I don't want to affect, my mind has a lot of control over the healing. And if I feel like there is no hope, then my mind is not going to allow my body to heal possibly. So I'm like, I don't even want to hear this. And I'd actually, I remember after the second brain surgery, I was more ready to hear those. They refused to do the second brain surgery unless I verbally promised them to go through chemo and radiation after. And they were at the point with my wife, like for 6 hours, they were arguing with my wife. I remember I was on IV Dilaudid, kind of just like hearing this. It was almost like I was hearing them on a different planet with my eyes closed. I was just like in darkness. She was arguing with the neurosurgeon, with the neuro-oncologist, and they're like, well, we can send him home and put him on palliative care. That's another option. But unless he agrees to chemo and radiation, we're not doing the brain surgery. We're going to send him home. And so I remember agreeing. Well, she finally called my cancer care center that's an alternative care clinic up in Minnesota, and asked the doctor there, hey, can he... My worry about chemo and radiation is you hear about people that go through that as the chemo or the radiation that really leads to their demise because it weakens their immune systems so much. And so that was my fear.
It's an ubiquitous way of attacking, and it kills everything in the ubiquitous nature of chemo radiation. So it's not selective. It's not going like a precise sniper weapon,
So anyway, the doctor gave my wife peace that we've got some things that can detox the system, that can help with the chemo. I did like pulse electromagnetic frequency therapy for cellular regeneration while I was going through chemo. And I took some things to get rid of some of the radiation and the MRI with contrast out of my body. So it gave her peace. And so I remember, though, one really, really good moment from God in the hospital leading up to that second brain surgery was a priest that came and visited me. I remember him sitting down by the bed next to me, holding my hand, and I was, put yourself in the position of like it coming back. It was worse. It was worse for me, honestly. It was so much of a test of my faith because it's like, man, this thing might just kill me. Your hope is really shook at that point because it's like, this is the most aggressive brain cancer in the, around. And I'd kind of known, even though I didn't want them to tell me, that they'd given me 13 to 15 months to live. And it came back in 3 months. And I'm like, wow, this may kill me. And the priest is holding my hand, and I'm just contemplating this. And that time it's COVID, not even allowing like family. Like my wife couldn't even be in there, except for certain limited hours. So I was largely just by myself. Like leading up to this brain surgery, they allowed her to see me right as they were wheeling me in. So I was like isolated. And this priest is holding my hand, and I said, I feel. I had my Bible with me. My wife had brought it. I'm like, I feel like I'm a failure because my faith is just shook right now. And the priest is like, well, reminded me that even Jesus Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before his crucifixion, as he knew it was drawing near, he said, Father, please, take the cup away from me. Please take the cup away from me if it's in. He said, but nonetheless, if it's in your will, I'll. He essentially was saying, I'll bear the cross, which he knew that's what the outcome was going to be. But the priest reminded me that was his flesh. He was God in flesh. And at the time, he was subject to the same fears and anxieties that I was going through at that time. And I remember holding that priest's hand, like caressing his hand unnaturally. But in that moment of the state I was in, that's what I was feeling. And, really, crying, not like bawling, but crying, and really being thankful in that moment. That was the peace I needed, from a priest. And so I went through that second brain surgery, and thank God the second brain surgery, they got 100% of the tumor resected. And I have I remember, I think that the brain surgeon honestly was like, he was irritated by me. I know that because I had screwed up his schedule. He had like 6 surgeries that day. I can't imagine being a brain surgeon and doing surgery on 6 people in one day.
Yeah.
He moved me to the last surgery of the night, like 8:00 at night. And I'm like, great. I'm like his last patient. He's exhausted. And he's pissed off at me for messing up his schedule, not going through chemo and radiation. And now actually, I remember going after my first brain surgery, going to see him. And after the CAT scan, they're just checking to see if post-surgery, how the inflammation's doing and everything, how your brain's healing. And I remember telling him, because a world famous neurosurgeon from Duke, I sent all my like MRIs and the surgery results and everything to Duke for a second opinion. And I remember like this neurosurgeon that did surgery in Ted Kennedy called me, and he was like, you have to come here, and you have to get here fast because you need to get the rest of what's still in your brain removed. He said, I can do the surgery for you. Because he said that surgeon didn't do a good enough job. And I remember I told my neurosurgeon what that surgeon told me.
Mm-hmm.
He was a world famous surgeon.
Yeah.
And I could see that disgusted him. But I think he was not afraid to go to get deep, to get all of it out, thank God. And he got all of it out.
It was the same surgeon both times for you, or was it a different surgeon the second time? Okay.
Same surgeon.
Okay.
It was the same surgeon.
So he got the motivation he needed. That's almost miraculous that you got a call from the world's greatest brain surgeon like that, right? That seems very unlikely.
His ego was hurt, Ryan.
Oh yeah. Brain surgeons are not notorious for their humility.
Yeah, that's the thing. They both, like, that's what turned me off about the Duke neurosurgeon, is like, this guy just is like a huge ego, it seemed like to me. Like, the out east, like that kind of mentality, East Coast mentality. It's like, I just don't have a good feeling. And plus, I don't really want to go through another brain surgery right after this because it's kind of painful.
Yeah. So, yeah, but, I had an encounter with some we mentioned my illness earlier. Well, it required an initial surgery and then a follow-up surgery, which was unexpected. And that second time I spent a few days, like I think it was 5 days, just like in a cordoned off part of the ER waiting for this blockage to pass. And I remember this group of surgeons come in, they were all eager and they were like, well, we love to operate. Like, we're very eager to cut you open. We're like fighter pilots. Like, that was the analogy. She was like, so you're like Maverick and you're like Goose. And like, they were just like, it was really weird, but they were like, we're just giving it a chance to work itself out. And I was like, okay.
Jeez.
But it was just funny. I'll never forget that. We love to operate and we're very keen to cut you open. And she likened herself to a fighter pilot.
And they don't, and the doctors, like even all the doctors I've gone through they never share if they have faith, they never share it. Like maybe a larger percentage of those type of like professional people don't aren't Christians. And then that lends itself to them having larger egos, But,
well, they have faith in man. They see what they can do, and they probably almost think of themselves as supermen, or And the word that I was searching for,
I thank God for him.
Yeah. Perverse is almost the word that describes like them eager to perform surgery. Like, uh,
Remind
I
me
don't
of
know.
a scene from some movie with Alec Baldwin talking about how when the mother goes in to the waiting room and she prays to God, she's actually praying to him, the surgeon, whose daughter's life is in his hands. But yeah, the God complex. Um, that was whatever movie that was. It was a powerful role. Um, so yeah, your second surgery was a success, and
Yeah, and
they.
yeah, I'll get back. Let me get back on track on that. So I went through chemo and radiation, and I felt like there were several things that led me to that. Um, my mom, and then God was in these things too. So my mom, like one day, decided to walk to the store, which she never does. It's only like a half mile away, but why walk when you have a vehicle and you're getting groceries? She wasn't getting a lot, but she thought she'd walk through her neighborhood to go to the store. This is, I don't know if it was after my first or second brain surgery, but it leads into what occurred after the second brain surgery. She ran into a lady she'd been friends with that lives in the neighborhood, but just happened to be walking outside at the same time. And she told her what was going on with me. Well, it turns out she had just gone through breast cancer, and there were some people that gave her information on some alternative treatments, like was mainly the ketogenic diet. Um, and so she got all this information, my mom did, from this lady, an old friend that she just happened to see as she was walking to the store. And she passed that on to me. And that got me onto the keto diet, which I knew like as a, oh gosh, what's it called? Kind of like an augmented therapy, like it had been tested. I later find out it had been tested with brain cancer and other types of cancer to go along with chemotherapy to improve the efficacy of it. And so the fear I had with it actually went away as a result of another thing. My mom had started searching for other people with glioblastoma, and she found somebody that was a 20 plus year survivor of it, which is, rarely heard of with the cancer that I have. And she had written a book on it about her struggles through it and what she had done. And she had gone through like 7 rounds of chemo, 7 surgeries, 7 radiation treatments. And anyway, that got my mom. That got me like kind of the strength. Like if she can go through all that, then I certainly can. But also, we got onto a Facebook group that was long-term glioblastoma survivors. Anyone you're considered a long-term survivor if you're around for 3 years after initial diagnosis. 3 years or more, you're long-term, which thank God I am now. But all of the long-term survivors have gone through chemo, radiation, the standard of care treatments, plus alternative treatments. And she got a ton of alternative treatment stuff that I could do along with the chemo and radiation that I'm still doing today. But I guess God just really through, like Cheryl Broyles was her name, the long-term glioblastoma survivor. Through her story, God gave me the courage to go through chemo and radiation, which increased, I fully believe it increased my chances of beating this. I tried to beat it on my own without it, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it this time. So God would help me through the chemo and radiation. He led me to people along the way to share my journey with. I still keep in touch with to this day that are going through other types of cancer. I know there's a reason that I had to go through it again. It's just, it's further purification, a test of my faith, test of my perseverance. Yeah, so I'm still, I haven't had my last chemo was August of 2022, so I'm 2.5 years out from that. Doing a ton of alternative stuff that I got off of that long-term survivor group.
What when you say what you said before, really, I think is key is the long-term survivors are doing alternative therapies. So have you spoken to any long-term survivors that are not doing alternative therapies?
One guy.
Okay.
It leads me to question whether he actually was diagnosed properly, or he's just the luckiest guy alive. He was a 17-year survivor, and
So
he just went through like intense IV chemotherapy for like 6 months at a clinic, and never changed his diet, never did any alternative treatment, and it just has never come back.
and no surgery?
No, he had surgery too. So
Did they say that they removed everything?
I can't recall that, but yeah.
Well, that
But
could be very key
other than
if you
him,
remove
no.
everything or not.
Other than him, I don't know of anyone that hasn't done a ton of alternative stuff. So.
I'm looking at this from my perspective, which is unique, but I guess I'd want to everyone in the like that potentially can listen to this and might have a family member or themselves experiencing these things. Although I would think it'd be more like family members that would listen to this. That the key to this is, for me, like personally, and I think you would recognize this. You can just say yes or no, that cancer is not what they think it is, or what it's commonly thought of. Correct? You think that now?
Who? Yeah, me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to think that definitely, because it's what leads to the metabolic dysfunction that proliferates what they call cancer. And
Yeah.
that guy, this guy, you on that journey of researching what is really cancer. You know what's funny about that is, because Rafe, I'll let you talk in a little bit, but parasites. I remember Rafe had come across that, and he'll get into that a little bit as we have, depending on how much time we have. But my dad, he repairs and refinishes furniture. So he comes into contact with customers and talks to them and shares some things in his life. So he was sharing with a particular customer of what I was going through with brain cancer. And this woman said, well, yeah, that they thought I had brain cancer, but I went up to a Mayo Clinic for a second opinion, and they looked at me and they said, no, you've got a parasitic infection in your brain. And so I know that it's possible, like in that instance, it was a misdiagnosis. Like they thought they were looking at cancer, but then a second opinion is like, no, that's parasites.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder if these regular doctors who aren't trained in parasitology can make a mistake. Like, who's examining these things in the MRI, and is it just their subjective opinion that leads to these diagnoses? Like, how do they even decide? What kind of criteria are they looking at? I don't know. I've done tons of reading, and I don't know.
I think a good segue point, as we kind of leap off from your story, Ryan, would be to try and identify, first of all, correctly diagnosing the times, right? So we're in COVID hysteria
Yeah.
and vaccine mandates, and just how much do you think that the irrational, I don't want to put words into your mouth. How much did what was happening in the COVID landscape factor into your distrust of, the medical treatments that were on offer for you?
Well, I'd say big time, because I lack of distrust in about every institution at that point. I do remember going back to work and getting sick with what I thought. I was never tested for COVID. I just figured it was, because I had never been sick like that before, in April of 2021. So we're talking a few months before the brain cancer. I was out for missed a week of work, and I was really sick for 2 weeks. And I had my skin was on fire everywhere, I remember. And I really didn't feel like I recovered it after that. That sickness that I was having coincided with me going back to work and being around a ton of vaccinated people. And so I was the shedding, you probably heard of shedding and potential effects that people have from the spike protein shedding. And so looking back, that could be part of what put me down the road, or at least it was a contributing factor, maybe in hindsight. So I was already had, like you had suggested, a distrust in the medical system.
Even
Definitely.
pre-COVID, and then COVID came, and the communication around it was so illogical, and the hysteria was so at an all-time. It was unmatched in our lifetimes. Just the messaging that
Yeah.
was coming from, the heads of government and the
Yeah, I
heads
had
of
the police called on me at a Chipotle for not wearing a mask, and I was like, "Well, you're not going to serve me." So then I started videotaping them, and then they called the police on me.
it
That's the
was
hysteria. Oh, and at a DMV, they refused. The guy actually physically prevented me from entering without putting my mask in.
Well, that's one
You
place where you're almost asking for it, because that's one of the most brainwashed areas you
No,
could
it just
possibly
speaks. I
imagine.
did say that because that speaks to the hysteria. People were.
I know.
I remember telling them at the time, if you're going to wear a mask now, what else are you willing to do?
Yeah. Well, four.
Yeah,
At one point,
it's true.
I think President Biden was wearing four masks. It was just, at that point you realize it's just signal, It's not function. It's just playing some kind of it's a theatrical prop
It
where
is. It's to create fear. Like initially, I remember when this first began, I didn't buy into the whole theory of viruses. I thought it was bullshit. Um, and I told Ryan, he was not a hysteric, but he was wearing a mask on a plane, and I made fun of him for it. This is like before the pandemic, right? Right? It was like
It was
it was like
December of
it was like they
20
were saying people were dying in China on the
2019.
streets.
December
Yeah.
2019. Yeah. Well, I was listening to Chris Martinson and Adam Taggart by chance, Tanner.
no.
Okay. Well, they do a lot of podcasting and YouTubing and stuff, and
Economic analysis,
but
monetary.
this is before it was out in the mainstream anything. Where I was wearing a mask when, like Rafe was saying, there was alternative media. You could hear people talking about what was later called COVID.
Yeah.
So
And I told him at the time, like, that's bullshit. I know it's if they come out with, declare a pandemic or anything. I don't know if I said that at the time, but I said I know it's bullcrap. So
I didn't have so much problem with a mask because I'd spent time in Taipei, the capital city of Taiwan, and different places in
yeah,
Asia, and this is the early 2000s. Everybody was wearing a mask. I mean, it's probably 50%,
that's
and
in their
and it,
culture. Yeah.
it's in their culture, and I thought it was mainly to do with pollution, toxins in the air, just because the
yeah.
air quality was so poor. And I'm sure it filters some microbials, right? But it was silly. And then when they started piling them on, then you realize, okay, yeah, this is a show.
Yeah.
But the
Yep.
I mean, we don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but I can't miss an opportunity just to say, if you took the vaccine, then you have no reason to fear the unvaccinated. And you don't
Yeah.
hear people saying that out loud enough. Like the whole premise behind the mandates never made sense. They never tried to explain that part of it away. Like if the vaccine works, then when you take it, you're in the clear. Just don't harass the
Yep.
people who don't take it. I mean, but that was not the messaging. The messaging was very irrational, and that
No.
caused
Yeah.
distrust in me. Like it really eroded my confidence in my government and in, you know, d- everyone basically in my local med centers, and just because of the way that they behaved and the way that they keep parroting this irrational, you know,
Yeah.
line of thought. You must do it to protect your neighbor. Well, if my neighbor's worried, they can do it.
You're being selfish.
It does.
You're gonna kill grandma.
No, grandma can
Yeah.
get it. Grandma can get it. If it works, she'll be fine. If it doesn't work, then
Yeah,
that's a
and
different
at
conversation.
that moment, if they have to resort to making you feel guilty, then that something's very wrong with things, because that in itself is illogical. It's a psychological weapon, you know.
I saw them use it with the flu vaccine, and even then, I realized that was about money. So I thought, but
Yeah.
actually it was clearly
Yeah.
conditioning for what they were going to do in the future.
Yep.
Um, anyway,
Anyway,
yeah.
yeah.
So you were ripe to distrust. You were, I mean, distrust had to be at
Well,
an all-time high for you, and then you had to make the decision. All right, am I going to trust them on this one? On the
yeah.
radiation chemo, because there's so much information to the contrary. Um,
And Ryan, I don't think that the chemo and
Yeah,
radiation did you any good. I think that
it might not have. There's
just
no way to know.
you just got through it. I mean, I think the key was the surgeon said that he got everything, you know?
Yeah, yeah, he removed it all.
I don't know. I've just, I put myself in your shoes. Now, if tomorrow I get this condition, I'm going to get the surgery and I'm going to do the radiation, chemo, alternative treatment combo, just like you did, because you're a guy I know that worked. Those combination of treatments worked, But it's like you still forever will be wrestling with the erosion of our trust in these health organizations.
Oh,
It's
The
absolutely.
thing
I
really
was
it's a
is
already.
shame.
that the thing though is that how many people and they get the chemo and radiation and the surgery and it doesn't work for them. So, it's like how
Oh,
many successes do you hear?
no, I remember seeing it. Just a guy, after my first brain surgery, like with a consult, going into a consult with a neuro-oncologist before I had made my decision about chemo and radiation. This guy was skin and bones, like Walking Dead. It's like I already distrust chemo and radiation. There were so many people that died from it, and now I see like a walking skeleton in front of me. I'm like, no, this doesn't do any good for my trust. Not that I was probably gonna do it anyway, but yeah,
I think
it's crazy.
in spite of it, you healed.
You
Yeah.
think about cancer, and I'm not going to be breaking any news here. It's like, how can you put billions of dollars into cancer research and it be a complete, by and large, utter failure? Decades of billions of dollars going into cancer research. It's because they're trying to find a silver bullet that they can patent and make money off of. Whereas the long-term survivors are going at it with like a shotgun approach. Like, I don't give a crap if it's the CBD, CBG, fenbendazole, ivermectin, the melatonin at night, the this or that, the high dose curcumin I do, the mushrooms I'm taking. I don't give a crap which one's working. I'm not trying to isolate crap. All I'm
Yeah.
trying to do is throw the freaking world at this thing and hope something sticks or multiple things stick. And I could care less if you can prove this, and then therefore be able to, through the AMA, be able to prescribe it. These doctors, they don't even prescribe or mention alternative treatments. All they do is whatever the standard of care approved by the insurance industry and by the American Medical Associations. That's all they tell the patients. They don't say, well, if I was in your shoes, I've heard this, and this. I'm not saying do it, but by the way, you might want to consider these things. They don't even do that, in my experience.
Yeah, because how much per chemo and radiation treatment or per that pill, like the chemo, does the doctor make? It's like an outrageous amount of money, isn't it? Like,
No, it was
didn't they tell you?
per
That's why
like
he's pushing it so hard
per like chemotherapy pill. It's like $10,000.
And
in
that's
their pocket,
how
right?
much money their compensation may not be directly tied to the medication, but the medical center, the infusion sites, and all that, the hospital's getting a big chunk of that money, and then they pass it on however they do to their
And
Yeah.
meanwhile,
doctors. I mean,
the doctor's not like some sinister dude that's saying, all I care about is making money off of these patients. I don't care about healing them." They're actually like in like blissful ignorance. Like, they've been indoctrinated. They're highly educated about things that they think are completely true, but really aren't. And so if they know this is what I'm expected, this is the prognosis, this is the prescription of what he needs to go through, because this is what's been approved by the medical associations, they think they're doing exactly the right thing. Even though they might have this other voice inside their head saying, why don't I see this working at all? Shouldn't I be, out of the goodness of my heart, researching what's working for people and educating? Like, these doctors don't even have the freedom to suggest alternative things. Can you imagine being a doctor? Like, that's your actual stated like professional goal, is to heal people, but they don't ever get at the root cause of any of it. How could you? I mean, how satisfying can it be to not even ever treat a root cause?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, again, COVID was a good context for this discussion because doctors who did recommend alternative treatments got disbarred or whatever it is. They lost their licenses or they got let go of, the hospitals fired them or whatever. Um, you hear stories like that. I follow at least a couple of them on Substack. Just doctors for writing ivermectin and
I follow them on X too. Doctors, Dr. Macus, who's up in Canada. A lot of people get ivermectin and fenbendazole through him and other things.
there
So
was an ENT here in Houston who got let go from, I don't know if she was with Methodist probably. And then there's a guy out in the UK that I follow who was a surgeon. Same thing. He lost his credentials um, just for his refusal to, I don't remember what he was not doing. Not maybe he spoke out against the mandates or something. But yeah,
yeah, that alone could do it. And then there are people that were, if you're a doctor and you're prescribing things for off-label uses, like ivermectin, right? They were getting their medical license revoked and things. And
Well, think about all the. I mean, it's partially about making money, but how do they not, put all this? They put all this money into it. How do they not find the answer? What's the only answer to me is they have to be deceived as to what it is, and all of this is clouded by money, first of all, but secondly, the deception. It's like not seeing the forest for the trees. Like you're never going to find the answer because one, your heart's not in the right place. And secondly, it's because disease and the nature of disease has been covered up on purpose for multiple purposes. One, to make money, but also to depopulate, and in order to carry out agendas that we saw like COVID. If people buy into your theory of disease, then they're going to follow your advice as to what to do, and it's going to be based upon fear. And you look to a system, and the system itself, just camouflages the true nature of things in order to carry out the agenda we just saw. I mean, I'm rambling a little bit, but I mean that's why, like, it's all based upon lies, like Satan, Lucifer, the father of lies, and the love of money is the root of all evil. And so, how do these people, like, how are they not aware? It's because they're making money, and they just don't question. They don't truly question in their hearts things. It's only when you get to the situation that we're in, why we're discussing that right now. Family members, like, am I saying I know exactly what's going on with disease? Perhaps to an extent, I think I do. But how can I claim to know more than some doctor that's went to school for this? I mean, I don't know more than him in relation to what he's doing, certainly. But as far as the true nature of disease, I would say perhaps, yeah, I do.
it would be helpful
But it's because
for
I'm
me.
searching with my heart. So
Yeah. So
go ahead.
it would be helpful to know what are the statistics like? What is the survival rate in general, all forms of cancer? Do you know how successful is chemo and radiation kind of broadly as a treatment? Um, that would help to understand where they're at, the prescribing doctors, how they assess their success. I'm sure is through some type of, it's it's uh it's numbers.
mm-hmm.
Do you have any idea generally like I know there are many different types of cancers, but
Mm-hmm.
talking
I
with Scott the other day, he said 2%, and I meant to look into that, but I
and then how
just
do you define success? Like,
I guess survival
but
Yeah,
or
survival,
remission.
how long?
but
I
the
maybe
survival
yeah.
is typically, it's short term. It's really, I don't know if it's like 3 years or more. Like it's not like a high bar to
Depends
hurdle.
what type of cancer, right? But yeah, for glioblastoma, like 13 to 15 months. Like you got a bell curve right in the middle of that bell curve, 13 to 15 months.
That's
Um,
their yeah.
Wow.
uh, and that's with chemo and radiation. For the cancer I have now, I don't. You have to do the same research on all of them. Like, and And so
Yeah.
these insurance companies, they do have statistics that show, okay, if you have chemotherapy with this, then on average, you're going to increase your lifespan by 6 months, 8 months, So that's what they have for all these cancers. And they've proved, and they're right. Like, yeah, because chemo is going to kill anything, It's just, you're administering as high a dose as possible that somebody can tolerate before you kill them. And therefore to kill the cancer cells that are in them. So, because the
but
chemo is
then
going to kill every cell in your body.
the cancer returns in or in many
Well,
cases
it's
at
just like
least.
anything. You throw Roundup in a field, for
Yeah.
years and years and years, but you still see some super weeds out there, right? And so you have these cancer cells that genetically, although through their quick evolution or whatever, they develop resistance and they become super cancer cells, and
Well,
no chemo can touch them.
well, so maybe we'll get to what I found in my journey, but it's this whole literature on cancer and the words that they create. It's it's done on purpose to conceal the true nature of things. You're essentially you're creating something out of nothing by giving it a name, and it's literature that is meant to hide the true nature of things, in my opinion. But we could get to we should talk about, Ryan, what you said after your first surgery, but you don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. After my
That your
first surgery.
wife, that
Yeah.
Dana relayed to me. She said that you told her the first thing that you said when you came out of surgery was, "Tell Isaac that there's worms in his apples."
Yeah.
So
To wash the apples.
yeah, because there's worms in his apples.
I don't recall any of that though.
I'm thinking
So
of
she
Isaac
called.
Newton. Are we all thinking of Isaac Newton? Who are we thinking of?
No, it's
No,
Isaac.
that's-
Sorry. Isaac is another brother in Christ at my church. So
Oh, I'm thinking of the apple. The guy who
Yeah.
discovered
No, yeah.
gravity. There was
Yeah.
probably a worm in that apple too.
Mhm.
And
I'm
she
sorry.
called
Go
him.
ahead. So
Well, there was also the coincidence of the scar on my head. If you guys saw a picture of it where it was like a raised like C on the side of my head, like really big, like the whole side of my head essentially. After the surgery, the way they do it to heal it, it raised the skin. Plus, there were staples like every say a quarter inch or less, maybe an eighth of an inch, and so it looked like a big worm on my head. And I remember like on the Friday, it'd been like August 13th. August 13th, 2021. So before I came down and was diagnosed with brain cancer, I remember, like I had said, I was like, how am I going to provide for my family? I got to find a new profession, move. It's going to be uprooting my family. Like, what's going to, and it was in the midst of COVID. So it was like the whole economy was crashing and everything like that. So I was worried about all that. So in the midst of that, I'm like, one day I just had like out of just a thought, I'm like, okay, what if I got an old house? It's 100 years old or so, a little over 100 years old. And I'm like, what if somebody stashed some kind of treasure in here? Let me see if they got some gold coins or something. I'm really like searching around my house, just not very long. Like I'm looking at these, like an old crawl space and moving some bricks around. I remember like breathing in and I felt this feeling like go up my nostril and just like felt like it lodged in my brain. And I remember thinking at the time, man, that feeling's not going away. And it really didn't. It just kept on progressing and led to my emergency brain surgery. So that was 2 days before. You remember I said I was on my knees praying and I prayed to be in God's will. And so this is 2 days prior to that. And now thinking back to the apples and worms and now what's on my head looking like a worm and you're going in an old crawl space, you're disturbing some soil that hasn't been disturbed in 100 years perhaps. It's like, who knows what kind of like parasitic larva or whatever could be in there, So it's like, I don't know. Like I was trying to equate. There seemed to be something connecting worms to what was going on with my health. So,
yeah,
and
that's the poetic language God sometimes uses, right? Just
mm-hmm.
the likeness of things not necessarily literal worm, but just the scar in the shape of it's just yeah.
Yeah,
I
it could have been
understand.
just foreshadowing what was to come.
Yeah, foreshadowing. That's a good word. Yeah. That's
I think
fascinating. So
we have more to say about worms later in the discussion, perhaps, which I've already relayed to you, Tanner. But I'm not, and I'm just to be clear, I'm not saying that all disease is caused by worms or parasites. It's just one component of disease. It's more of a symptom, I think, than anything of disease.
yeah, it was interesting what you said earlier. You you give it life by naming it. So were you
Yeah,
suggesting that you sort of have this random collection, or maybe random's the wrong word, but you have a collection of symptoms and then you name it, and then statistically, as those symptoms pop up in that same grouping in the population as they would,
yeah,
you say, oh, well, that's this, even
yeah.
though
Like calling
they're
something the
independent.
flu. Like calling something the flu, and then they have their ridiculous PCR test that is we all probably know by now why it's bullshit. Where
I
they
didn't know.
name a
Yeah.
disease and say this is what this is, this random piece of protein or RNA, DNA, and because we amplified it 30,000 times, and
I
we
didn't know
found
if
it
you meant
once.
that or if you meant more
Uh,
in
well,
an
cancer
alchemical
itself,
sense, in the by
yeah,
speaking
well,
it
that too. You're right. Yeah,
by speaking it into existence, a sort
yeah,
the
you're right because
spiritual
it
element.
forms first. It first forms in your mind, right? A concept of something like anything starts, they say, alchemically in the mind first, and even as creators, the idea is first in your mind. So they create these words, these ideas for us, and they give it life by doing so. You know what I mean? In a sense, even if it's not real, it's almost like the Frankenstein, like perhaps like concept where it's dead, it's not real, but it's yet it's or the is it homunculus or something. It's you give it life by naming it in a way like a
like
magic.
like a tulpa. Yeah. So there,
Yeah,
for me, there's two branches of this. There's as we've outlined them basically. I think there is a way to talk about this and where it's not just metaphoric. Um,
yeah,
because we've already discussed the reality of the spiritual and your story about climbing under there. And as far as God being outside of time and space, that you went under there and got exposed to, you had this experience before you prayed that prayer, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
2 days before, two
2 days
days.
before. But that's no obstacle for God, obviously. But it's just so interesting. It,
So I
yeah,
was hunting for the irony. I was hunting for treasure in this world. Well, your heart is where your treasure is, right?
yeah,
So God was telling me, you're looking in the wrong place. Like your treasure, you're not like stored up treasure in this world. Stored up
yeah.
treasure in heaven. So
And he's allowed for these events to happen in such a way that you're able to construct a narrative and find his hand in all of this in every moment and say, well, God
yeah.
provided for this to happen. Yeah, that's very relatable to me. So, can we talk about the supernatural in this
I,
context? Rafe, do you want to delve into that?
like as far as my experience with
Or your
what I would
beliefs?
deem as put is well my beliefs, what I potentially think is supernatural as far as what my journey and all of this, and despair. And I mean, he's my identical twin brother, so the moment I found out this news, I was grilling outside, and my sister-in-law calls me hysterical. I could tell she was upset, and I knew there's bad news coming. I knew because Ryan, that the whole week was, well, since Tuesday had been sick, and she tells me that he has a giant mass in his brain, and I lost it. I hit my metal grill, the hood of it, like numerous times, and dented the crap out of it after I heard the news. And then I came inside and fell down on my knees and into a heap, like a puddle. Like I couldn't even get up, and I was sobbing like a baby with my boys present, which I regret now for them to see me that way. And my wife and my in-laws were here. Um, and it was that's the way it made me feel. Somebody that I've been on a journey with my entire life that in that moment, I realized how much of a crutch, I guess, our relationship was, and that it's you you walk through this life. Maybe a lot of people feel like this when they don't have somebody they're extremely close with and can discuss anything with, that they feel like alone in a sense. And I finally felt alone. Maybe like a regular person. I mean, they don't really think of it like that. It's, perhaps. But I felt alone. Like, how am I going to get through this life? And that was selfish, really selfish of me to think that way when I had my whole family here and everything, and responsibility towards them. But I was just thinking about my loss. And I wasn't even really thinking about Ryan and his family. I was just thinking about myself. Does that make sense?
Of course.
And what it meant to me.
I mean, we I imagine the twin connection, but besides imagining, I've heard stories about how strong it is and special. So, and I have a brother and a sister, and I have, you know, sons and a daughter, and understanding the sibling connection. Yeah, I can imagine your pain, and it seems proper that you would feel it internally, and you know, that'd be your first reaction is to understand how
Yeah.
it's going to impact you.
And it kind of makes me think of like my Ryan was like sickly as a baby, at least initially, had croup. And he had to go back to the hospital. My mom tells us, Ryan, you recall this, I'm sure, that
Yeah.
you were taken away from me, and I was, she could tell the big difference. I was sad. I wasn't myself. So the connections there, evidently from birth, really.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how old I was at that time, a month old or less. So anyway, I mean, so I guess I'm just saying that to give background as far as my state of mind and perhaps why I could have had a supernatural moment, because we had read the book of Job together, and this is, I mean, I wasn't going through his hardship, and thank God, because I don't have and didn't at that time, and I do more so now, but not in the same way as him, faith in God like him. So I don't know how, maybe I wouldn't have gotten through it. It's very likely. But from my experience, I was searching for answers while he was enduring what he was enduring. I was a friend of mine. I guess I'll just start by saying he sent me a text, and I'd heard about this, and I already didn't think disease was what they said, and I thought that cancer wasn't what was conveyed. Like, I'm like, well, why? What we discussed earlier, why haven't they found the answer? And I heard on Visigoth's podcast we discussed William Ramsey and my whole history as far as seeking the truth. So from them, I had heard that from others that cancer isn't what we're told. I heard cancer is a fungus, cancer is this or that. So my friend sent me a text like, "Hey, this guy said he healed from cancer, like stage 4. I don't know if it was intestinal. I can't recall. It's a common video that's went around from fenbendazole." So I'm like, "Holy cow!" I'll look into it.
I believe it was lung cancer, stage 4 lung cancer, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was, and that was from the advice of a veterinary friend of his. But anyhow, so I looked into it, and I prayed. And during work one day, I'm like, I was reading the Bible and Leviticus 14. I'm trying to think of why it was. Oh, because fungus, the nature of fungus. I'm like, what if cancer is just fungus, right? So I went on a walk that day, and after reading Leviticus 14, and I listened to, I forget who else about it. So there was a lot of things hinting that indicated to me that maybe that is true. So Leviticus 14 talks about essentially mold in a house, right? That's a big part of it. And this priest go to the house to cleanse it. And it talks about leprosy. And leprosy is actually caused by a bacteria, like a fungal, essentially like a mycobacteria. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go on this walk, and I pray at this big oak tree, giant, like couple hundred years old oak tree out in the country where I live. And Leviticus 14 has like some different parts to it. Doves,
Part of sacrifice, right? Or cleansing, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Regarding cleansing, kind of cleansing this house. So a priest, like a ritual almost. And so I'm praying at this oak tree, just in deep, deep prayer, like trying to give me answers, like the nature of this world and disease, and I'm down on my knees on one side of a tree, hoping nobody sees me, and just trying to go internal and connect to God. And then I go on my walk afterwards, and I'm just thinking and trying to pay attention to everything around me. And on my walk, I'll first. This is on my return that I was going to talk about, but on my walk on this country road, I look down my feet, and there's tar everywhere, and I see something imprinted into the road. I'm like, okay, I'm in an inquisitive state of mind. I'm just searching for answers for God and trying to, let him show me answers. And so I get something to try to pry it up because I couldn't tell what it was. And I dig at it, and I pull it out. And what do you know? It's a crucifix, Jesus on the cross. And I just, there were shivers like going through me, just, I couldn't believe it. Like, what are the chances? I picked this up, and it just made me feel like that I did have, not about me, but that Christ was real, and God. Not that I'd sensed that I thought that he was, but to me it was proof. Like, that's why I felt the way I did. It was just a surreal feeling. Just, do you know what I'm talking about? Just,
I know
I can't
exactly what you're
explain.
talking about. Yeah. He
Yeah,
he reached out to you into your
yeah, and then
circumstances, literally under your feet, and yeah, he said, "I'm here." Yeah.
yeah, and my walk back, I was looking at these pine trees, and oh, there's doves, and there's next to the oak tree, there's little flowers, like low growing flowers, and they weren't hyssop, of course, just because that doesn't grow around here, but herbs basically, right? So I'm trying to that can be me stretching out the narrative, but there was doves, there was the things that was discussed in Leviticus 14 revealed to me. So and I felt that at a very deep level, and I began to associate in my mind when I returned. I looked at the oak tree, and I looked outside. What causes disease out in nature? I mean, and it made sense to me that the same thing that causes disease in nature would cause disease in ourselves, in man, or in any living thing. So I associated the fungus, in this case, or mold, with death, in a sense, with darkness, if you want to look at it in that way, and the duality that I guess we're made to look at this world. And I think there's truth in that, from the dark side or the light side. I think that nature reveals that. So there's a purpose, and so to really, it's I'm trying to put a wrapper on this because we've been in this conversation for a while, but that was my mindset. And I remember going to church and driving, I think that day, and Ryan was at church just to meet him, to let him know, because I was trying to persuade him, like, I to not go through traditional treatments. And I had big arguments with my family over this, and I was the lone person that um, was in his ear to steer him away from chemo and radiation. So when that didn't work that first time, this first surgery, it really hit home with me. Like, not that I didn't lose faith. I still thought that what I, due to my experience, I guess, and due to my distrust in our system and the deceitful nature of our world as I perceived it, I still had faith in that what I felt about things and disease was true, that cancer wasn't what they said, and that it was related um, at that time in my mind, I was thinking of fungus. And once I got into the literature, I also found worms and parasites as well, um, all over the place, as it pertains to cancer. So I felt very strongly. And it took me a while to get through to Ryan in relation to that, especially after his second surgery, I think, right, Ryan?
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Because he had to have a second surgery, which I relate. I think now that it was because they didn't get everything the first time, which is why it came back. And the nature of the brain it's very difficult to treat it as well if you read about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll stop there if you have any questions.
Well, it's I don't know. I really, I really think that the way that you associate darkness and fungal growth and mold growth and the roles that they play as basically decomposers, right? That makes
Yeah,
sense that I mean they have a job to do, but they don't belong on the living body, right? They both their job is to kind of
to
they're
decay
they're
on
they're
things that have decay or death.
they're
Yeah.
carry on organisms or whatever.
So what happens in our body? There's damage. There's inflammation. It's
Yeah.
and what is their role? Are they? That's why I'm saying now. I think they're more of a symptom rather than the disease themselves. Like if you look at the growth in the brain, um, they're what they did was it was they themselves, I guess, wouldn't be the cause of his death. It'd be more the effect that they had because they were taking up space in his brain and causing inflammation. Um, but they were there because there was toxicity and probably damage of some kind. That's the way I think of it now.
When you think about how would mold spores enter, how do they get
Yeah,
subcutaneous or what, how does that even happen? You could, yeah,
through
maybe that,
breathing in, it can
yeah.
breathe in and go into your digestive system, get into the mucosal walls. After they penetrate the mucosal walls, they get into your bloodstream and they start reproducing and have their life cycle stages within you. And
And
especially if there's
And you,
a lot of
you
toxicity,
think
they're
about
going
them,
to,
Rafe,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
anaerobic in nature, right? The reproduction because they couldn't reproduce in
yeah,
their
I think
body
so.
with without oxygen. So they're anaerobic, and that always makes me think. Well, cancer is a metabolic disease that is
Yeah,
set in motion, or at least how I think of it, by anaerobic cellular reproduction, which is what the
yeah,
cancer cells rely on, is fermentation, which is an anaerobic process. Um, so
yeah.
so it jives. Is that's your take?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I did research in the literature, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I began to research the very nature of fungus and cancers, the their the cellular structures of them and how cancer is described compared to fungus, and there's tons of similarities. Now, does that alone prove anything? No. Are there similarities? The DNA of many things are similar in many respects, right? So I guess that doesn't prove anything in and of itself. But if you look into the literature and how things are described, um, they're remarkably similar. Um, Anyhow, yeah, I mean, I began to just go deep down on that road. I wrote a document. I had a Word document out where I went into the Bible and talking about Jesus on the cross. Actually, it got me thinking about the crucifix that I found, and I could read it. Maybe you could bring it up. I don't know if you want me to.
Yeah.
It's not very long, but it's in relation to that passage and the beauty it's discussed as far as the metaphor that's used. I have to
Ryan,
go. Let me bring
is
it
he
up.
in and
I
out
should
for
have
you
already
too?
had it
yeah,
up.
yeah, he's in and out for me.
Okay. Yeah,
You're
Rafe.
crystal clear though.
Hey, Rafe, can you hear us? This must be something good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The devil's disrupting the line.
Yeah.
I think that happens
Is it
sometimes.
Yeah.
better now? Is it better
No,
now?
A little bit.
give me a hand up and I'm gonna see what the delay is. Yeah.
All right. My hands up.
Okay, yeah. I think you're
Good
back.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me look for my email because for some reason when I search on my computer, there's a lot of delay, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But hold on. I titled this Word document "The Great Deception." Let me get it. I'm not going to read the entire thing because it's really just my thoughts.
Read as much of it as you want to, okay? We're not in
Okay.
a hurry.
I guess I'll read from the beginning and I can cut myself off if I need to. Um, The Great Deception, System of the Beast is what I titled it. I never bought into the propaganda. However, I have recently found the ivermectin link to the fear-based COVID phenomena to have a thread of useful information. Presently, I don't really want to write a large amount about what I have been led to by a higher power, but would like to share the information. I changed my mind. The words are flowing. There's very little editing from this point forward, or so I said at least. We'll see. Hypothesis. Many forms of disease we see today are from fungal leprosy. Leviticus 14 is why I said that. Pathogens. Something not taught much or at all to MDs. Viruses don't exist unless you think of them as fungus. Now, I'm wrong now in reflection. I thought I knew what I was talking about. And I still would say I think I know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I'll go on. Cancer does not exist unless you refer to it as fungus. We have been deceived. Great evil, dragon, Leviathan, the serpent, is reigning now. The book of Job can guide us in sending it back to the deep, to the pits of hell. What arrogance I had, I guess. Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. If we were to go back to our childlike minds and disregard everything we have been told about disease or any of creation, we could discuss things in a beneficial, thought-provoking manner. I think that on this forum, that is possible. As I was writing to somebody that does a podcast, actually, so that's what I meant by that. I never got to speak my mind, but so I said I think on this forum that is possible, as I have rarely seen anyone be attacked by another on this board. If you all are interested, I will share what I think has been brought to me through, perhaps, in my mind, it is not perhaps, providence. I was led to this information. I did not put in the work. Other righteous individuals who could only come to correct conclusions through seeking the truth for all that is good put in the work. However, what they have brought forward was already written about in the Bible, specifically in relation to disease. We need to look to Leviticus 14, scarlet, cedar, log of oil, hyssop, blood of a live dove. And at that time, I put EMF in parentheses due to the way they navigate. Leviticus 14 is the law of lepers. It prescribes a cure for leprosy, which is also associated with sin and redemption from God for those sins. The Levitical law of leprosy, fungus. Exodus 12, unleavened bread. Many other instances of unleavened bread, obviously. Why, though? Think yeast, fungus. It was and is a sin to consume fungus. Now, I don't think that. I was writing that at the time. So it's kind of like a primitive form of thought for me to try to understand things. And I'll move on. This is a quote from the Bible. Come now and let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Scarlet is used 52 times in the KJV. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? In the Gospels of Matthew 27:46 and Mark 15:34, Jesus cried out the same words while hanging on the cross. In verse 6 of Psalm 22, Jesus says something odd. But I am a worm and no man. What do you mean by saying I am a worm? Usually in the Bible, the Hebrew word for worm is rimah, which means a maggot. But the Hebrew word Jesus used here for worm is tola'ath, which means crimson worm or scarlet worm. Both scarlet and crimson are the colors of blood, deep red. The crimson worm is a very special worm that looks more like a grub than a worm. When it is time for the female or mother crimson worm to have babies, which she does only one time in her life, she finds the trunk of a tree, a wooden fence post or a stick. She then attaches her body to that wood and makes a hard crimson shell. She is so strongly and permanently stuck to the wood that the shell can never be removed without tearing her body completely apart and killing her. And I have, in parentheses, Jesus on the cross who died for our sins. And I guess I can leave it there. I have more explanation, but that gets to the heart of what I was thinking at the time.
I was thinking of the language talk. I don't know, is it Gehenna or the place where the worm doesn't die? In reference to um hell, I guess.
The worm
Or
dieth not. Are you referring to that in the Bible?
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah, you hear that.
that's part of I think it's in one place, right? Where it's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a description of um
Is it in Mark? I had it brought up here in Mark
It's
9:44.
it's in the gospel. Isn't it the rich man that is in Abraham's bosom?
You're probably right, Ryan.
and
Yeah.
Lazarus,
You know the
yeah.
Bible
So
well.
he was asked, yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
he was in that place where the worm lives forever, essentially. That
Hmm.
was just more worm language that came to my mind while you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Leviticus outlines basically the law for cleanliness as far
Yep.
as consumption and interaction with God's creation.
Yep.
And it seems like the obvious place to start looking for a person on your journey there. And you were that was just kind of like you were spitballing and
Yeah.
outlining um, the places you found affirmation and leads in
Yeah.
your
I had
biblical
read about all of
research.
this beforehand, and that was before I went on my walk and my prayer, and then I found the cross. Um, and then I wrote about all of this afterwards, which is what I wrote, like the beginning of what I wrote. I just read to you guys.
So, and it's some years have passed since you first delved into all this. How
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
how much, how much, how prominent is this type of research on the landscape of disease? Like, are people
Mm.
publishing peer-reviewed studies on parasite contribution to this disease or that?
You'll you'll find not really attributing it to disease, the common diseases that they have named. Of course, that it goes back to you create a name, and yet then you almost create life into itself. Um, but they do that you'll find in much of the literature for cancer literature, when they do autopsies on people on their brains, that they will, along with the cancer tumors, they will find um, larval sacs, the what are other, and you can term them as cysts as well, in like Lyme disease patients, they'll find fungus molds in the brain while also finding larval cysts.
Really, molds and funguses in the brain.
Yeah, and what
Wow.
you find, that's what you find with people that have dementia. You'll have molds, like a plaque that develops in the brain. That plaque is a mold, if I remember correctly. That's what it is. And
Uh,
what is in worms, you'll find they hide. And if you go to anybody that's a specialist, like a naturopath that specializes in detox, they'll say that the fungus or the molds and the funguses hide the parasites. So it's almost like they're wrapped in a cocoon of protection, where they're hiding away from the body's immune defenses.
Wow. Ryan,
And that's it. Yeah, go ahead. You'll find this literature everywhere, so you won't find it like you will find it some like where they find it's almost like concomitants with cancer. Well, they'll just raise it as a peculiarity more so. Um, but if you just delve deep into the parasite literature, like in the National Institute of Health literature, um, you'll find all kinds of stuff that will that you'll that indicates that disease itself, much of disease is caused by these things. Like the disease itself isn't as described, basically, is what I'm saying. And what I know now is, well, I say no. What I strongly think, is that viruses don't exist, unless the true nature of the word virus in Latin, as most people probably are aware by now, is toxin or noxious substance. And that is how, if you look into royalty, so the dark nobility, black nobility, aristocracy, They historically have used poison. So the most nefarious minded of, of those peoples, those bloodlines, utilize poison to gain power. And what was the primary method? The primary poison, like because it was most ubiquitous in nature, was arsenic. So that's a toxin. And if you look at the nature of a virus, and the way they describe a virus is it's a protein. Okay. And that's if you look at a venom of any snake or a Gila monster or whatever, what are their what is the venom comprised of? The chemical components. They're peptide chains, amino acid chains. They're the proteins. Just like a virus, it's a protein. And then you have lipid enwrapped proteins, and that's how they describe a lot of viruses. Like there's a lipid shell around them. Well, how do you just in these vaccines, there's lipid nanoparticles. What are the nanoparticles? They're toxins. So you have lipid shell surrounding the toxin, and that lipid shell binds to your cellular sites in your body, to cell receptor sites, and cell receptor sites are actually just proteins. So it's almost like a key and a hole. So you have metals that are toxins that are wrapped in these lipids, and they bind to the cell receptor sites, and they affect how your cells operate, which is what they say viruses do. The metals, the protein, they do the same things the toxins do. Like whether it's a Gila monster toxin, which is used in now, and the weight loss drugs, that's what they use is Gila monster toxin.
Really?
Yeah, they derive just one chemical from it, and then it affects how your cells in your small intestine operate. So they produce a certain, I don't know if it's an enzyme or whatever, but it causes damage in your body. Basically, it's a toxin.
Yeah.
So
So Ryan, apart from that one experience you described where you're crawling around in the crawl space and you inhaled that substance, right? It seems to me like you're allowing for that to serve as an exposure to some type of mold spore or whatever. It kind of lends itself to this uh, hypothesis, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Rafe and I have talked about that.
Or have you done your own research, or where are you with the idea that it could have been
Well, I
the
mean,
source of your cancer?
I finally, other signs from God that led me to a naturopath. I think I might have mentioned my 5-year-old. Maybe I didn't mention her. Yeah, I did in my story about that moment of despair I was in, and she had like scald covered skin, right? Because she's got severe eczema.
Yeah.
which I related to
So
leprosy. Sorry to cut in. Yeah.
yeah, and Rafe had been talking to me, trying to tell me about all the information he was getting, and we finally got my youngest Mavis into a naturopath to treat her, to try to figure out what was going on, and specializing in parasite and heavy metal detox and that sort of thing. And she was this naturopath, and through Rafe was kind of already nudging me this way. I started going to her. She wanted to treat me. She was really insisting on treating me because she was pretty sure that what I was going through was parasites. And yeah, so I started going to her after, oh gosh, it was but I probably waited until November of maybe Thanksgiving, maybe around Christmas 2023,
After the
Okay.
second surgery, of course. Yeah.
2022 or 24. I can't remember. But anyway, I started going to her, and I went through a parasite detox, heavy metal detox, and the parasite detox, I got rid of like thousands of worms that came out of me.
You saw
Um,
them.
yes. Oh yeah. In my
You can
stool.
see them with the naked eye. These are worms. Like,
Oh yeah, they were like 6 to 12 inches long. A lot of them. Oh, I have pictures of them. Yeah, they're It's crazy. And the CDC even admits, if you like Google this,
Yeah.
Yep.
they admit that 40% of Americans have intestinal parasites. And that's what they're admitting. I'm sure it's much higher. In third world countries, I talked to a friend of ours who's his wife is from Venezuela. I talked to her. They said, yeah, in Venezuela, we do like yearly, we do parasite cleanses, parasite detox.
Yeah.
So,
It's not
but
something
they
that
are,
it's not a part of. I've got 3 kids, and we aren't screening for parasites, and we aren't taking, anything prophylactically either. So,
Yeah.
uh, that's wild.
Yeah, and I also did a parasite cleanse myself, and I had my own experience. Um, but I passed many where I get to the point where I didn't eat for a week, and I was in tons of pain. My left testicle was swollen up and purple, and I almost went to the doctor. But anyway, I even because I'd read about urine therapy, I'm like, I can't pass anything. I couldn't poop. So I'm like, I'm going to just try to drink every drop of my own urine. And I did until I could poop. And when I pooped out a bundle of worms that would like be a cast of my intestine, just all tied together, and they're white. So there's no poop surrounding them. It was just a knot of like worms wrapped around one another. Multiple.
That was
Yeah.
as a result of the detox you were on,
Yeah. Yeah.
which included urine therapy.
Yep.
And then did that clear up your other issues after the
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yes. I mean, since I was a kid, I will tell you that I have had stomach problems, stomach aches. So it's been part of every time I got sick. Oh, my stomach hurts. My stomach hurts. So, and my boys, when I listen to my youngest, well, now not my youngest, but he's my middle child. But he'd always say his stomach hurt. I put up both my boys on parasite heavy metal detox cleanse from the naturopath, and they both pooped out worms the same way, looked the same as me. My mom too.
Ryan, anybody else in your family on that detox program?
yeah, my youngest, Mavis. Yeah.
And and did that help with the eczema?
She's slowly getting better. Yeah. She's definitely in the last year gotten, she was so bad before that she couldn't sleep through the night. She'd constantly wake my wife up because she'd scratch herself until she was bloody.
Poor
She
girl.
sleeps through the night now. So,
I've got that. I've got that on my right hand. It's always the same hand. I'm gonna have to get the details on this. Maybe get your naturopath's number before we get before we wrap it up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just wow.
And I wouldn't say that it's, again, I don't want to say like parasites are that's what's causing everything, but it's a combination of things. And I discussed this with you, Tanner, and Ryan, and I have in depth. There's many, it's toxins, it's the environment, right? So, like, I think that Antoine Béchamp, or no, on his deathbed, that said that Louis Pasteur said the germ is nothing and the environment is everything. And I think that's more or less true. It's the environment within, and that's why I get back to Jesus on the cross. We need to cleanse our sins, right? And the sign of sin, or the way sin is described in the Bible, is blood red. And the babies of that beetle, the grub, were white, pure, and that's the way we need to try to make our internal environment and the external environment, of course. I mean, look at the pollution and everything around us, which is the reason what really finally compelled me to call you. Just I'm getting sick of looking up at the skies and the toxins everywhere, and my boys being sick and me being sick and many people being sick. There's just this week, like there was like 5 people out at my son's school, and they said I went there and talked to the nurse, and she said there's just tons of kids sick, and I think they're actually, this is going down the line of conspiracy, but there's not even really anymore. They're spraying things just like in the polio pandemic. Like what caused it was DDT. They were spraying DDT on, in the East Coast. They started in Vermont, I believe. There was the Gypsy Mob story. It was destroying their plants, their fruit trees or whatever. And that's what I thought they were doing with this drone activity. And they still, I don't know if that's true or not, but this is something I do wish to convey, and it relates to poison, is that, and in relating to vaccines, is before I called you was, and it relates to DDT and the spraying of insecticides, insecticides were mainly, at least first in orchards, they used lead arsenic, which DDT, they were using lead arsenic everywhere to kill insects. And what did I say that the aristocracy uses to poison people? Like, you've probably seen in movies where wine is, because arsenic is tasteless, odorless, tasteless. You can't taste it. So they would put it in wine to kill competition.
Yeah.
And to poison everybody in a room at once. That's, you've seen that scene in different TV series recently, like Game of Thrones or whatever. But it got me thinking, like, they're spraying, like you can see the old commercials of them spraying, fogging the streets, and then the housewives spraying on all the furniture and everything. And it got me to thinking, are they doing the same thing now? I was looking at Eastern equine encephalitis, but and what they're doing in New Jersey. And I actually called a guy there that's part of a project, and they are using drones to spray insecticides. Now, I don't think they're doing this on a widespread basis across the entire United States or anything. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I wanted to get to was there's an interesting bit of literature on SIDS, the sudden infant death syndrome. And they tell you not to lay your infants on face down because they could suffocate, right?
Yeah.
Well, I found out exactly what is going on in SIDS cases. There was a study with the MMR vaccines where they found in the presence of organophosphates that antibodies did not present, which was, they wanted to know why. What about organophosphates would prevent the antibody activity that they were seeking when administering vaccines? Because they want to know that, hey, is there antibodies present? That means that the vaccine is effective. That's what they say, at least. So I'm like, okay, what are antibodies? They're just basically secreted by white blood cells in order to eliminate toxins. So they're injecting a toxin into you, and your body's responding to try to get rid of the toxin, right? Which they say is a virus, whatever. But this, in the presence of organophosphates, the antibodies weren't present, so it decreased the antibody activity. Oh, so your body can't eliminate the toxin as readily. And I'm like, that's a nerve agent. What they found was why they include something called piperonal butoxide in insecticides. And that is what they call a synergist. It prevents an enzyme from being secreted called cytokine P450, I think it is. And that enzyme is, the white blood cells is responsible for that activity, that it's a superfamily enzyme. And that enzyme eliminates toxins. So what that does, it prevents insects from eliminating, whether it's lead arsenic or what they're actually including in the Anvil 10+10 insecticide is pyrethrin, which comes from the chrysanthemum flower. It's a chemical that's a neurotoxin. So when they combine it with that organophosphate, it synergizes and it makes it more effective because the insect cannot detox from the poison that's being administered. So what is piperonal butoxide? It's an organophosphate. And what is that also? That's a fire retardant. What are they putting in these mattresses, in the crib mattresses and in many mattresses? Flame retardants. So these children, after being vaccinated, are being laid down face first, breathing in organophosphates after being vaccinated with a toxin. So their bodies, because they're breathing in this organophosphate, they're not able to rid themselves of the toxin. So that's what's killing them.
Wow.
Does it make sense?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I can only take your word for the science that it does what it does. But I assume it does. Where'd you discover that? How did you discover that?
I was just searching for answers. I'm okay, I'm just breaking things apart in the most simple way. Like, what is what what is a virus? What do they? How do they describe it in the medical literature? Then what is a poison, a venom? What are the chemical constituents? I don't, I know it's a poison, but what is it made of? What is a virus made of? Same thing, they're described as proteins, So I just go down that road, and then I look for medical literature. I look for those terms, and I look for the chemical, like, any literature regarding the chemicals themselves and so forth. And like, what are they? So what is piperonal butoxide, And if you look into pyrethrins, and they were researching that stuff, the Nazi scientists, and probably before that, I mean, as nerve agents, as biological warfare, So they've perfected this kind of crap.
A lot of this stuff is
It,
multi-component. It has multiple components, right? So like with what you've described there as being the cause of SIDS, it's the vaccines in combination with
that's why
the
it's so hard to
mattresses.
pinpoint. You can't say, "Oh, it's
Yeah,
just the vaccines," because why isn't everybody dying? It's a
yeah,
combination. It's, are you introduced at the same time in a time frame that your body is trying to deal with this and it can't rid itself, and then you're breathing in this organophosphate, which is as synergist, which doesn't then it prevents your body from secreting enzymes, your white blood cells from detoxing essentially the poison.
yeah. It just, you reach a place where you have the type of mind where you can absorb and retain a lot of
Yeah,
knowledge. Most people aren't going to be as gifted, right? And even as somebody who's navigating their way through their own disease state, looking for solutions, looking for answers in literature
yeah,
it's just, it seems, even in my own experience, it just seemed like an insurmountable thing. Like the situation that I ultimately had to put myself in was whatever happens, God, it's up to you. I've trust in you, and I'm putting myself, you're sovereign over my placement in this place, and these are the options that I feel like are best for me. I'm probably wrong, but do something good with
yeah,
it. And in his way he did.
yeah,
And yeah, it's just like, will we ever know the truth? Will we ever know the right combination of truths? If this thing with SIDS is like, if you've uncovered something there, that needs to get around, you know? Who are you talking
yeah.
to about that?
That's why I like speaking out. I'm like, man, I'm tired of seeing like the evil. Like we don't have answers, like you said. And I'm reached a point in my mind where I want to kind of move on for my own health. Like I went down this road and it was all stemming from Ryan. Like before, it was just me cursory reading others, but then I went hard in the paint, to find answers in medical literature myself, because I'm like, I can't just rely upon somebody's word, and I got to study things fervently myself and try to make sense of it. And so I went into the hard medical literature that they publish at the National Institute of Health, in the medical journals, and they don't provide answers there, but you just have to piece things together. So that's why. So I feel compelled to come out. I'm nobody.
No, you're not
Um,
nobody. You have a certain giftedness. You have to take my word for it, I guess. Maybe Ryan understands this about you. Um, you're muted. You unmute yourself, Ryan.
No, I
There.
was just thinking, I'm like, I was actually thinking when he was talking, I'm like, if that wasn't my brother, would I find him credible? And I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I think if I was the average person listening to what he just said, my mind would be freaking blown. And I would be like, man, this guy must be like some scientist to talk about. Like, so I'm with you. Like when he's talking to me, I'm like, I don't know how you've pieced. I can't imagine how many hundreds or thousands of hours you must have put into
I
researching this
have.
stuff.
I've wasted so much time, and there's never going to be any, and I never would look for any monetary benefit. That was not my motivation. I'm just so pissed off at evil, I guess. But I'm tired of that anger ruling me, I guess. I need to get off my mind, and this is kind of helping me do it. Like I need to provide what I think I know, what I found out there for others, so they may not have to suffer.
Yeah.
And maybe we can start changing things in this world.
I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out. I think that would be really fantastic. You know, I'd like to be hopeful that it is a possible future reality,
I
that
know.
something we can achieve and accomplish. But that's just all I know to do is to pray for good things, you know.
Amen to that.
I
Yeah,
I don't have a lot of confidence in my ability to influence even the people I care most about sometimes, you know. So it's like,
I hear you. I can't.
uh,
I mean, yeah, we all go through that. Like you're trying to, like Ryan's saying, like he felt like Don Quixote, and you know what? I completely relate to that. That's the way I feel right now. It's like I'm Don Quixote, like I'm just getting angry, and I'm almost allowing the evil to rule me, and not live my life and to with my children. And we talked, Tanner, and what is your goal? It's you want to leave. Like I describe this place as the beast system. That's what we're seeing take place right now, and people are always looking for an external savior, and Trump is the new one, you know. And I don't think he is that at all. And to me, what we were discussing is we both feel the calling, and Ryan did before he got brain cancer. Is he wanted to move to Arkansas? He wanted to be a goat farmer. We want to just get back to nature, man. To live in this world, and to not live in this what we see is clearly is an evil system that is. It's like the Pied Piper, like that we talked about our children being. It's almost like they're being lured by the flute, lured by all of these devices and all the distractions, the sports, everything. It's all a spectacle meant to put you in a trance, to lead you down this road, to harvest your energy, you know. And I'm sick of it, man. It's disgusting.
yeah, I am right there with you. Yeah, we're trapped in this hamster wheel, and that, you know, maybe I think in my experience and hearing you talk, Ryan, that was part of the gift of the illness. That was part of the gift was to just kind of, you know, it's like, well, at least
Yeah.
in my case, I was not prioritizing my my time correctly. I wasn't the desires of my heart were not what they are now. They were my own, and they were
Yeah,
shaped by the culture more than they were by God, who, you know, who well, somewhere in the Psalms it talks about how God will give you the desires of your heart, which gets misinterpreted and mispreached sometimes. It doesn't mean whatever you want, he'll give it to you. It means he'll change your heart and make your desires his desires, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's what suffering can do for you and did for me. And can you relate to what I'm saying there?
No, yeah, absolutely. It, I'll just put it this way: never once, when I was reflecting on my near death, did I ever think to myself, "Do I, I wish I would have done this for a living, um, or that." I was not upset about the accomplishments of my life. What I was regretting was not living each moment to its fullest in the present with my family, with my loved ones, my friends, not
yeah,
essentially giving God's love to others
Oh
and
man.
honoring Him. That was all I was. And there was one day I was like crying like I've never cried in my life. I was thinking about that. Why did it take this to get me to realize what was important in life? How to, so that was the gift. It was a slap on the face, like you had said. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I still suffer with bouts of this, you know, depression and things that you had discussed earlier. But it all centers around generally purpose, fulfillment in my day. And the answer is always love, thankfulness in the moment. And, you know, my purpose is going to be in the way that I love my family and my neighbors. And
yeah.
where I'm falling short and where I'm feeling lacking and where I'm wanting more, it, generally, I think it could be fixed if I home in on those things that I already know I'm supposed to be doing. I think. I don't know. I feel like I've been blessed with this affirmation from this discussion with you guys. Um,
Not
yeah.
you're on the and
Yeah, that's exactly
I
how I feel.
I agree, and I don't have you guys' experience going through the suffering, the immense suffering that you both did. But I've reached that point in my mind, the same thoughts that I know that truly the most important thing is your family first, and then loving thy neighbor. You know, there's Ryan. You've talked to me about like the two. I don't know if they're referred to as like this the simple rules or laws of God. Like if you just do two things, love thy God, right, and then love thy neighbor. Basically, is that right?
Yeah, Tanner had
Essentially,
mentioned that as well in our conversation earlier.
yeah.
Yeah, the whole law is
Allow though,
fulfilled or
yeah,
satisfied in loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and loving your neighbor as yourself. So
yeah.
if you're
If
doing
we do that,
if you're
then
doing all
world
those
the
things,
same.
you're fulfilling the law.
Yeah.
Pretty tough. Pretty tough to pull that off. But yeah, the ways that he helps us. Sometimes it really helps to put perspective the other things we're pursuing, right? The
Yes,
way that he minimizes the material world.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you guys, the story is amazing. It's a story of brotherly love and of endurance and patience and trust. And it's really, you know, beautiful. I'm so thrilled that you have made it this far. You're on the survivor list. You're in that you're on the outlier. You're way out of that bell curve. And
Yeah.
I'm in the outskirts.
yeah, that's right.
It's a good way to
Uh,
wrap it up. Yeah.
thank you. How did I miss an opportunity to say that? Um, Rafe, I'd love to talk to you some more about the work you've done in the realm of parasites. Maybe we
Okay.
can do an outline for
Yeah.
another show. And
Yeah. I'm no expert, but we all look
oh,
for experts. But I can just talk. I've done a lot of research, and I'd have to, obviously, before we discuss that things, I would have time to put things together in a orderly manner and try to convey things in a way that makes sense. But
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I just want to let you know I appreciate you. I understand your struggle to find truth and the anger and just I'm thankful there are people like you who have the mental capacity and then the tenacity to dig into stuff like that. I don't have it. So thanks,
I think
man.
it's almost unhealthy. Well, I know after a certain point it is unhealthy, but yeah,
I
You'll
don't have that
manage.
energy either, Tanner. And I'm his twin, so or the capacity in my brain.
Well, yeah, you guys
yeah, you
have
do.
each other.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just to me, it's like it's right in our faces, man. Like what I told you about the synergist is found in you can just read about insecticides and what they are. I mean, and it's all in front of our faces. It's just cleverly disguised and compartmentalized, hidden in different compartments. You know, so you never people don't in a synergistic way. They don't put the pieces together. You know, so it's like you can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah. There are things that help ring my bell. It's like, the people that make Roundup also make the cancer treatments. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. And that's really bad.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Things like and I think there's a lot more of that circulating, which is good, but it also, there's also so much, you just like, it's like we said earlier, we're swimming in a sea of facts, of truths and untruths and half truths and
yep,
intentional mistruths. And it's like,
yep,
yeah, you almost have to arrive at it miraculously. And that can be the role of the Holy Spirit, I think. And as far as
yeah.
our individual choices, how he leads us, how he wants us to process what's happening to us will be for our benefit and his. And it might be different from person to person. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not to say that
And
truth isn't a very
yeah,
it's
objective.
not
You want to say it's
relative.
objective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's not a relative thing, but the way and the timing that we arrive at different things, I think
definitely.
sometimes
Yeah.
is necessarily staggered, not
And we didn't
uniform.
discuss. like you think of disease, there's environmental aspect and so toxins, and then there's a parasitic element of too. But then we discussed on the phone, and Ryan would agree, there's also the spiritual element or the unseen, frequency. I mean, I would say kind of goes along with spiritual in a sense, maybe. But
Kind of in
and
the
I was
same
just
way
talking
that
about,
parasites can go. I mean, when I think of parasites and viruses and bacteria, I mean, they're all just talking about size essentially, right?
yeah.
Um, but sorry, yeah, frequency and spirituality. I don't know. That seems like
We
more of
and
a
when you
leap
tie
for
that
me.
back, I talked to you about the Seen Gospel of Peace, and they discussed worms coming out of people, right?
Yeah.
They're cleansing, worms come out of their butts, and they actually, Jesus was healing a man, and he burnt milk, and he put the milk, and this guy was about ready to die. He was in tons of pain in front of the guy's nose, and what came out of him, out of his mouth? A giant worm, and Jesus grabbed the worm and smashed it with his head with two stones and killed it.
This
That's
is
what was,
this is
and I say this because the scenes related worms, as I told you, is they called them the physical embodiment of demons, and actually Jesus in that I later read associated it with Satan and Beelzebub.
worm, snake, I guess same
Yep,
shape.
yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. I mean, there's this whole. We can discuss that if you want to on another
Yeah.
podcast. But
That's yeah, it's fascinating. That was a story from one of the apocryphal books.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Essene Gospel of Peace, so I don't
The
think
Essene
it's not. It's
Gospel.
not an apocryphal book, but
It just didn't
unless
make
correct me if I'm
it
wrong.
didn't make the cut for it's not canonical.
No, no,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
anyway, Ryan,
Well, it
God
was a
bless you, man.
thank
And
you.
and
God bless you too, brother.
I appreciate you. And uh I'll be praying for you here in the short term, just for um continued cancer-free status. And you look like a super healthy guy, so just praying that
Right.
you get to enjoy your fitness and your health, for more years than the average Ryan.
I appreciate it, Tanner. It was a pleasure talking to you, meeting you, and thank you for the opportunity to share what God has done for me in my life, and to really just to glorify Him, to be able to share it with others. So thanks for the opportunity, brother. I'll be listening to your podcast now that I know who you are.
Okay, some of them are pretty good. Some of them you could skip, I guess. You can make that determination for yourself. I think I got two platforms now. I got the Substack thing, so I do like a little blogging and do like poems and stuff. But then yeah, the podcast is separate. It's hard to keep it all straight in my mind. But yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you, Tanner, for giving us the opportunity, and um, I would consider you a friend. I was talking to Ryan, and it was when I spoke to you, it was like almost like speaking to a friend, like a longtime friend, because I think that speaks to the kind of guy that you are. I mean, you're so easy to talk to. So,
Well,
thank you.
likewise. Yeah, I appreciate you and thank you both for your time. And yeah, please, thank you. Call me friend. I don't have enough. It's rare
Me
to,
either.
it's like, we have acquaintances, but as
Yeah.
people with a very particular worldview, right? With hope in a life that's not this one, that's pretty
Yeah.
radical. And
Yep.
the way of Jesus is very radical, and we need help along the way so that we can be brothers to each other. You guys,
Yep.
you guys are as brother as you can get, but I'd be so thrilled to call you both friend. Yeah.
I'll call you brother.
Brothers in
You're my
Christ.
brother in Christ. So
Thanks, man. That's what I
Yeah.
was
I'll call
hoping
you
for.
brother too.
I was reaching for that hug. All right.
All right.
Okay, guys.
Well,
Also, one more
great.
one more comment.
Yeah.
Thrasher, that's like the raddest name of all time. I grew up not allowed to read Thrasher magazine, but I was a skateboarder, right? So,
seriously,
oh yeah, still am. Like
Wow.
yeah, I'm I'm a rare type of skateboarder in that, and then I'm not. I won't talk about skate culture, but yeah, what a cool name, Thrasher. What is that? I only know it from like Radness, like, dude, you thrashed, or
Yeah,
you know.
it's either one of two occupations from what I've read, and it's either the traditional thought of threshing grass, like being a thresher of a field, but the other one is an executionist. Somebody that's an executioner, that's a thrasher. I think it was people. What I read is it's like a ball, a spiked ball on a chain that somebody would be flogged with. So
Wow,
I'm ready to use that on some people.
that is intense. There's a
Maybe
third
our ancestors
occupation.
did that, Ryan.
There's a third occupation. You could be a professional skateboarder, I think, and be called a
Yeah.
thrasher.
In the
Maybe a
modern
surfer.
sense.
Yeah. Wow. That's rad. Especially Rafe Thrasher. I mean, that just sounds like a professional surfer. I thought for a
Not that
while
cool.
I thought it was like I wasn't sure if it wasn't a pseudonym or something, but that's actually his name.
I know I shouldn't give my name out because there's only one.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, all right, guys. We've been on here for a while. Wow. I've
I
enjoyed
know.
every minute of it.
Yeah, me too, man.
And thank you again. And please let's be in touch.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
God
will.
bless you, brother.
All right. God
Yeah.
bless you
God bless.
guys. All right.
Bye.
See you later.
Hi, friends. Welcome to behind the scenes look at post production on the Outskirts podcast with Tanner and Friends, where I am chewing my Caesar salad. Please do find me on Substack. You can look for the Outskirts podcast, or you can look for Drifting Pinions, which is my Substack handle where I vlog and blog and poeticize. And that's where I post all my video interviews. Cheers.